Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Hi, welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. My name's Neil Munro.
And I'm Ian Stone.
So today we're going to cover managing asbestos left in place, or kind of leaving asbestos in its place. What do you need to do?
Yeah, because ultimately, and that's what we've said time and again, asbestos doesn't have to be removed. There's a big kind of fear amongst people, I think, and a misconception of asbestos is found, it's got to be removed. That's not the case. That's not what needs to happen. It's not the
HSE line, is it?
No.
The HSE line, if you look at across all their guidance documents, the line is if it can be left in place in a good condition and recorded on a register so we know about it, and that register's kept up to date, then that's kind of the best thing to do. As long as the material's not going to be disturbed or is not likely to be disturbed during the everyday sort of occupation of the building, it's in a location which, that can be maintained for its kind of life cycle.
It's horses for courses. So you need to look at the asbestos item and to see whether it can do that. So can it be managed?
Well, this is it. This is where some duty holders fall down, because they kind of take that, recommendations is leave it, ain't got to do anything. But that's not the case. And it all comes down to assessing the risk, really, doesn't it?
And the long and short of it is, if you leave that in situ, will it be okay for the next 12 months? Or is it likely to get damaged or be damaged again or whatever? And this is where you can't do this assessment from sitting behind a desk. You need to have knowledge of the property and the premises and the asbestos and what it's used for and the footfall that happens past the area and all the rest of it. So as a client, if you're sitting in your head office doing your priority risk assessments for all of your retail stores, well, what you sell as a business is the same, and how your kind of employees work within there is the same, but each building has its own individual inherent risks and problems associated with it. And that's what I mean by each individual one needs to be assessed in its own right. So you can't just take one, talk about asbestos insulating board. If you've got it at one site, you can't just take that one risk assessment and go, that's going to be the same across all of our stores, because it's not. So every time there's asbestos found, each individual asbestos location needs assessing in that manner to make sure that if you are planning on leaving it in situ, can it be left in situ and managed? And that's the key word. People kind of drift off after left in situ because they go left in situ, done. It's not, it's left in situ and managed. And that's the key word, managing it. You're not just leaving it and turning a blind eye. You need to actively do things to make sure that it's safe and it continues to be safe.
And you need to think about what maintenance you need to do as well, because, if you've got an asbestos ceiling, day-to-day occupation, it's unlikely to be disturbed from people walking around, general activity. However, you might have lots of high maintenance lights, security systems on the ceiling. Does that work if you've got to maintain those security system lights on a regular basis? Does having the asbestos there still work? Is it likely to be disturbed from those works? And that's kind of sometimes forgotten about as well. It's like, it's on the ceiling, we're not going to go near the ceiling and everyone's all cool. But actually, we get the lights maintained, or the fire system, the security system, whatever it is on that ceiling, maintained on a regular basis. And actually, to do that, they've got to disturb it.
I've got another example as well that people need to consider. Stock rooms, for instance. You could have a asbestos insulating board ceiling in the stock room. And again, this is where two stores could differ completely. One, you have a ceiling height that's stupidly high, your cages, the shelves, they go nowhere near the ceiling, so you've got no risk from it. Whereas some of the small little older stores, perhaps in older towns, things that they run out of space quite quickly, so you have to try and utilise every square inch of the place, have shelving put right up to the ceiling, and the ceiling heights might not be as high as well. So then you've got that risk of people banging stuff back on the shelves, clambering up the shelves, taking stuff off, and again, damaging the ceiling, which, again, that's why same asbestos product, same location, completely different risks between those two sites.
So if asbestos is going to be left in situ, basically everyone needs to know where it is, what it is, and what they need to do. You need to give that information to not just the occupants, but anyone that's going to be doing maintenance or working within the premises. They need that information on where the asbestos is. And most importantly...
And that is the most key thing to do, to tell people where it is so it's not disturbed.
Yeah, and important is like... People think, okay, we'll just tell anyone that's coming in. But it's not just the maintenance people or the contractors, it's actually the occupants. They need to know.
Yeah.
They need to know that they're working next to it. And this is where some people try and keep it quiet because it don't scare everyone. We don't cause any concerns. Not that they're doing anything wrong, but it's the communication, because that's going to prevent any accidental, or even if there is accidental, it's going to get dealt with and reported quickly.
Exactly, that's the thing. There's that fear factor around the A word, around asbestos. Yeah. You can't say it without creating fear amongst people. Yeah. Which, that is the case for some, but...
It's an emotive word.
It is very emotive. A lot of people know somebody who's died from an asbestos-related disease, or they know that it causes cancer, at least. And that's why it is so emotive. And I get it. However, the smartest way to deal with this is to share that information and the knowledge about where it is in the property and not to damage it. Because then, instead of having one pair of eyes once a year coming to look at that asbestos to make sure it's safe, you suddenly have 100 pairs of eyes all watching each other's backs, looking at the asbestos, and the second it is damaged by whatever means, it's notified instantly and it's dealt with.
That's what I mean. It's dealt with accordingly and correctly to prevent any greater exposure if there has been.
The thing is, right, so take the stockroom scenario that I mentioned about having a low ceiling. If you don't tell your staff about the asbestos ceiling, they're just going to...
They're not going to treat it with the respect that it deserves.
No. So the scenario could be, if you have that inspected once a year, on day one, the asbestos surveyor comes in and he inspects the ceiling, says, everything's fine, hunky-dory, you're good for another year. And then, so day two, or day one, if you like, of that new year, until the next inspection, one of the staff members goes in and wallops a big box up against the ceiling, it cracks it. Well, you've then got 364 days where you've got a cracked, damaged asbestos ceiling where people are going in, being exposed day in and day out. Whereas if you flip it on its head and you share that knowledge and information, well, it'd probably do two things. One, they'd be more careful with your stock. And two, they'd be more careful around the asbestos. And like I say, if there was an accident to happen, at least it was managed and dealt with sooner rather than later. And that's the big key thing. And like I said earlier, that's the whole point of managed and left in situ. It's not just leave it and forget about it. It's leave it in situ, don't disturb it, but manage it. And if there is an issue, well, raise the alarm, get it sorted, get it fixed.
Which kind of leads on to if you are leaving asbestos in situ, obviously we've talked about you've got to assess it, you've got to have all your procedures in place on how you're going to effectively manage that. Part of that management could be considering whether you're going to label that material or not. Mm-hmm. Because labelling, again, it's kind of the last line of defence, but also it opens it up to all the occupants to say, and it clearly defines this material is asbestos.
Yeah, we've got asbestos here because I can see the labels.
Now, lots of people don't like to publicly announce that they've got asbestos. Again, talking about this taboo subject, it's clients see it as people won't want to interact with their business or won't want to be in their property if they publicly announce that they've got asbestos. So labelling is always kind of, I wouldn't say shied away from, but definitely is considered as an issue to publicly say they've got asbestos by clearly labelling everything.
Definitely. There's a definitive line, isn't there, between front of house and back of house.
Yeah.
And what I mean by front of house, I mean like the actual shop that we all see.
Joe Public, you can look at your wall and go, Jesus, that's asbestos.
Yeah. You're wandering around a store and you're thinking, oh, shall I buy this jacket? And then you pick it up and on the wall behind the jacket you've just picked up, danger, asbestos, do not disturb. Again, just from the fear factor around that word, I can see why people wouldn't want to do that, which I think is totally fair, as long as you are managing everything efficiently. And that's the thing, like you said, it's the last line of defence. It's not a defence. You can't just rely on, oh, well, I've labelled it, because, well, that's like, if somebody's managed to come into your store and circumvent your signing in procedures, seeing the manager making sure that they've got asbestos awareness training, taking copies of their asbestos awareness training, making sure they've got all the risk assessments in place. For instance, if somebody circumvents all of that, well, they walk into the boiler room to go and do what they need to do, and there's a big yellow sticker on the wall that says, danger, asbestos, do not disturb. At least that's there waving at them in their face.
And some clients get away or get around it by having a different labelling system that Joe Public won't know or recognise as, it's not saying asbestos, danger, danger. However, it is clearly defined. And if you are educated and familiar with those site procedures, again, that's a last line defence, which is a more discreet one, isn't it?
Yeah, so examples for that, I've seen symbols with the wording see site register. So you could have a triangle or a square or a star, and then it's saying see site register.
Permit to work.
Yeah, permit to work systems. So those type of things. So you don't necessarily have to use the A word to put things in place to make people... Essentially, that's what it is. It's making people stop and think and consider, hold on a minute, what's this sticker all about? Hold on. I'm going to go and check. And that's literally all it is, because like you said, it's that last line of defence. It's not kind of if I've labelled it, I'm happy, because you're not. You've still got to do all these other things of having a site register and making people sure that they assess their work and their workplace before they crack on. But it is part of that whole kind of kit that people can employ and use to defend themselves against asbestos disturbances.
If you have got asbestos, which... one, you don't want to remove, or you can't adequately protect it, stop people actually coming into physical contact with it. Really, the key message is you need to tell everyone. And you need to have those procedures in place to educate people not to disturb it, report any accidental damage. It's having all that in place to kind of basically prevent exposure.
So I hope you enjoyed that one. Lot to think about there, lot to consider. If you wanted to chat through any options on how you manage, how you want to manage, what you're doing currently, whether it's good enough, by all means, reach out to Neil and I. We'll gladly provide some assistance for you and give you a hand.
Education is really the key. It's educating everyone. Educating your staff, your occupants, your tenants, your maintenance staff, anyone in your business. It's not just the managers, it's the troops on the ground, as to refer to them. It's everyone needs to be aware and prevent exposure to asbestos.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one. Remember, asbestos first, not last.